It was a quiet morning on the Isle of Sodor. Henry had yet to return from hauling last night's flying kipper, and most of the other engines had already gone out for their first trains of the day, which left Gordon and James alone in the yard at Tidmouth. "I say, James, have you noticed anything unusual lately?" "Nothing much, apart from Charlie's antics following the Toni Basil concert last week." "Oh, really? Do tell." "Our number 14's sudden obsession with the Mickey song got so annoying that I came up with a parody of the iconic cheerleader chants just to shut him up." "And how did that go, dare I ask?" "Oh, Charlie, you're a swine just as dumb as orange rind. Hey, Charlie! Hey, Charlie!" That is fucking priceless. It worked fairly quickly and all, although he hasn't managed to break away from his other silly shenanigans. Come to think of it, I don't suppose you've seen any unusual things yourself. Only the bizarre disappearance of Thomas and Diesel around 3 weeks ago. I asked Percy and Toby about it when I met them at Elsbridge yesterday, but they haven't the foggiest idea where the E2 and Class 08 have gone. That's a little weird. I'm due to take a local train to Crosby soon, so I'll ask Topham if he knows anything about this when I get to Knapford. And with that being said, James bid farewell to Gordon and puffed away to fetch his coaches at the station. It wasn't long before he arrived at Tidmouth Halt, where he noticed Connor, of all locomotives, parked in a nearby siding. As the station master was busy in his office, the streamlined J3A was asked to pass on a message to the NWR's number 5. It turned out that the Fat Controller was nowhere to be seen at Knapford, which left the Red Engine feeling even more confused. But at the same time, he felt a little better knowing that he'd sort of got an answer about Topham instead of just being left in the dark. As James made his way along the main line, his desire to find out what Thomas, Diesel and the Fat Controller were up to only increased. He even tried asking Murdoch if he had any intel, but the 9F was no help as he knew nothing about the situation. James had no further success for the rest of his journey to Crosby, or as I call it, Crosby Stills and Nash. Once the coaches were all empty, he shunted them off the main line into a siding. At this point, he was so pissed off about his failure to find out where Thomas had gone that his face went as red as Steve Plunkett's hair. "Oh damn it to hell in a hat basket! Why is it so fucking hard to find out anything about where that little blue bastard has gone?" "Well, James, watch your language, this is a kids show for Pete's sake." I wonder where I've heard that quote before. Before either the locomotive or driver could say anything else, 2 familiar locomotives came round the corner and into Crosby Station. Bloody hell! If it isn't the star-billing bastard himself! And a good day to you too, James. Perhaps it's also worth mentioning that you lost the game. Shit! Where the hell have you two been? You were gone for at least 3 weeks. Well, it actually started around a month ago. One day, I was sitting at Farquhar as usual when Diesel suddenly turned up. I had the Fat Controller on board, and he asked Thomas to come with us immediately. And weirdly, Sodor's biggest McDonald's fan didn't say where we were going, but I soon realised it would be a long journey when we went right through Barrow-in-Furness without stopping. And I'll tell you what, the Class 195 Civility units didn't half look confused as we passed by. Here's a thought. Why would Topham choose Diesel as the only other Sudrian to go with Thomas? It wasn't really Topham's idea. More so, a result of the bigwigs at Mattel working with some company I had never heard of before the trip. Dovetail Games, I think they were called. That's funny. My driver's son plays a game from that company, although I can't remember what it's called. In any case, the son was apparently ecstatic when he realised that he could play as you or Diesel. And that's exactly why we were whisked away to Minehead at short notice, to take part in the development of an add-on, although we didn't necessarily want to. There were several long filming shoots, and I kept telling the brass hats that for every minute I have to work, I need a minute of play, but they wouldn't listen. Anyone would think Dovetail is run by Harry Enfield's Loads of Money character. We were essentially acting out a generic story for something called Train Sim World 5. That's it! That's what my driver's son plays! Come to think of it, I wouldn't be surprised if they move on to a 6th iteration before too long. As for your experience at Minehead, dare I ask how that went? Let's just say that I'm very relieved to be back on home turf at last. I thought the West Somerset Railway was too long and demanding for a little tank engine like me, especially with that steep climb out of Blue Anchor. I have no idea how Stepney's sister Fenchurch managed it. As for whoever wrote the story, they tried really hard to appeal to kids or anyone else who's less familiar with our franchise, while seemingly alienating the veteran fans at the same time. And you know what? I would have forgiven the brass hats for the generic story if they had at least modelled my branch line for the game, or any part of Sodor for that matter, instead of making us go all the way to fucking Somerset, of all places. Did you at least get to meet any other locomotives on the WSR? Like that one 260 tender engine converted from a large prairie, or whatever it is. No, we didn't see 9351, or any other steamers for that matter. They were all mysteriously hidden away in the shed at Minehead, and the only WSR residents we met were Diesels. One of them looked a bit like Jeff, the Class 47, and the other looked like me, albeit in a green livery with wasp stripes, and both of them lacked faces. It was just the weirdest thing to see. The whole line felt completely deserted. And it didn't help that we weren't allowed to haul any of the WSR's regular rolling stock. It says a lot when even yours truly, of all locomotives, would have preferred it if we had at least one more Sudrian come with us, regardless of whether they were steam, diesel, or electric. I dread to think what Edward, Henry, Percy, Connor, and the rest of the fleet will have to say when they find out about this. I dare say we'll find out soon enough. Catch you later, James. And with that being said, Thomas and Diesel set off from Crosby for the rest of their journey back to Tidmouth Sheds. News of their return spread around the island faster than one can quote all the lyrics to the criminally underrated Over My Head and Do You Wanna Dance by Toni Basil. But only Edward and Henry were waiting to greet the returnees when they got back to Tidmouth Halt. Welcome home, lads. Cheers, Henry. How have things been while we were gone? A little chaotic. What's with all the sudden changes to the roster and what have you? More engines would have joined Edward and I on the welcoming committee, but they're all busy. Henry and I got off lightly when it came to being reassigned. You should have seen the look on Gordon's face when he had to cover for Dennis on the brewery shunts yesterday. I can only imagine what that would have been like. It's probably like how he would have reacted to the way he was modelled in the Down the Mine pilot. In any case, where have you two been all this time? Thomas and Diesel proceeded to explain to Henry what they had told James back at Crosby. However, this only left the NWR's number 3 feeling a little pissed off. More than just a little pissed off, Mr. Narrator. How the hell is the narrator's voice diegetic? Never mind that now. Why would Dovetail and Mattel only send 2 Sodrians to the West Somerset Railway? It's a damn disgrace, I tell you. Calm down, Henry. Although I understand your frustration, I'm sure the bigwigs had valid reasons for only sending Thomas and Diesel. Well, that's certainly what they wanted us to believe. Although I agree with Henry in thinking that it's weird for only Diesel and I to be in the add-on. Dare I ask what you think about this, Edward? You'd be surprised, Thomas. I would certainly have liked to be in Train Sim World myself, but I'm not at all bothered by being left out. At least it's another way to raise awareness of our island, despite the story taking place on an existing route that Dovetail made for the game in 2018. That's a fair point. I still can't say I'm a fan of the way Dovetail executed the idea of a Thomas add-on, but I suppose it's fine if other people like it. Presumably, that's as long as they don't try to shut down the conversation for people who disagree with them. You've hit the nail on the head, Henry. And now, I guess we'll just have to sit back and see what the community thinks of this situation. And with that, Thomas and Diesel said goodbye to Edward and Henry, then proceeded back to the junction and along the main line to the sheds. The 2 engines were looking forward to a good long rest after their journey back from the West Somerset Railway. This will likely be the last Trains 2019 Thomas video I make for a long time. I enjoy writing stories, but there are numerous aspects about the whole process of putting them to screen that bring down my motivation, like my severely limited vocal range, my consequent lack of confidence as a voice actor, having to reinstall everything when you change the local data folder, the terrible download speeds from the download station if you don't fork out money for the damn first class ticket or whatever it's called, so many routes still missing dependencies and not having a goddamn clue where to find most of the dependencies that aren't on the DLS. I started making Trains 2019 Thomas content in March 2023, and since then, I've tried to focus on doing what I can do despite all the limitations, and managed to finish 31 episodes in the process. But I've pretty much lost patience with the whole thing at this point. I thought Turn Up the Radio (Mickey) would be a good story on which to end the run, for the time being. And I may write more stories for the Free to Adapt collection, but I'm not making any promises on that front. In any case, there are other people out there, like Thomas 1, Edward 2, Henry 3, Fan of Hero, DCG12B, Victor Tanzig, and TB76 Returns, that are much better at making Trains Thomas videos than I'll ever be.